Welcome to The Anxious Voyage. If you think that title sounds bleak or foreboding, one of two things must be true. You're very lucky, or you need to get out more. On this program, we share stories of life and living. We compare notes. We discover commonalities. We accept that life is a glorious, heartbreaking thing, and we embrace and celebrate all of it. Take the ride with us. We're glad you're here. Now, here's your host, Mark O'Brien.
Hello and welcome. For those of you not familiar, this show airs every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern, with live call-in video shows every first and third Mondays at 1 Eastern. You can watch or listen on the live stream on your mobile devices or in your cars by saying, "Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network." You can get the Dream Vision apps, or you can find us on podcasting networks that include iHeart Radio, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and more. To learn more, to find our full schedule, and to see our show archives, please go to dreamvision7radio.com. And as always, we're coming to you live from World Headquarters in Middletown, Connecticut, home of the annual high-stakes Crazy Eights tournament. I am humbled and grateful to welcome this week my guest, Yonason Goldson. I was fortunate enough to go to New York City to have lunch with him and meet him in person for the first time last week. And now I'm lucky enough to be with him again 5 days later. Yonason, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Mark. And I venture that luck doesn't have that much to do with it, although a certain amount of providence and good fortune that our paths crossed originally, and then we've got to know each other so well.
Thank you, and amen to every word. I am, let's say, strongly encouraged not to discuss politics on this show. But I am very reluctant to ignore the elephant in the room. And so, since you shared with me that you have a son in the reserves of the Israeli army who was called up to the northern border, I will ask you how he is and whether you have heard from him.
Well, thank you for asking. Yes, I have heard from him occasionally. He can't give us too much information about what he's doing, but I thank God at the moment things are relatively quiet. We hope they will stay that way and get even quieter. But his spirit seemed to be good. He was not expecting this. He was actually visiting Israel for the holidays with his fiancée. And as some of the listeners may know, the surprise attack was on the last day of the holiday. It's an 8-day holiday that is really an extension of the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, concluding with a festival we call Shmini Atzeres. And here in America, we didn't get news of this really until midday. But he was there on a vacation, and he got called up because he was in the IDF several years ago, and he's now with other reservists, training, rehoning their skills, and prepared to defend their country and their people.
Well, God bless him, and God bless you.
Amen.
I feel like we might be working backwards a little bit here, given some of the things that I would much like to discuss with you today. One of the many things by which or with which you describe yourself is the ethics ninja, which I just happen to love. You have a program that airs at 5 o'clock Eastern on Wednesdays called Grappling with the Gray, which is named for a book of the same title that you've written. It makes me curious how you grapple with what is going on in Israel ethically.
Yeah, well, that that's a hard one to tackle without talking about politics. Uh,
True.
the sort of the overview, or maybe that's the general view that can really be applied to any situation. Israel at the moment, which is very close and very personal to me, but Ukraine, um, American political topics, Supreme Court, abortion, climate change, you name it. It all has to start from a position of intellectual integrity. And that means that first we have to do the best we can to find accurate information. One of my favorite quotes is from the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan: "You're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts." And even facts are dangerous. As another one of my favorite quotes, Mark Twain: "There are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics." You can take facts and you can spin them any way you choose. And I just posted an article today, which is an overview of the history of ancient and modern Israel. And one of the comments that I got on LinkedIn is, "This is just anti-Palestinian propaganda." Well, maybe. You don't have to trust me. But where's your evidence? What are your sources? How much effort have you made to investigate, to learn, to find out? There's an extraordinary book. It's not an easy read. It's very dense. It was written in, I think, the 60s by a woman named Jane Peters, if I remember. A non-Jewish woman who, in the introduction, the book's worth it just for the introduction. She says that she was passionate in defense of the Palestinians. She was a journalist, and she wanted to write a book exposing the injustices that Israel had perpetrated upon the Palestinian people. And so she began doing her research. And she does exhaustive research. And she describes that the more she investigated, the more she discovered that the narrative was nothing like what she expected it to be, what she has been told that it was. And it ends up being a book strongly in defense of Israel. But just that introductory framing is so critical. Here you have a woman who didn't simply allow her preconceptions to dictate how she interpreted or the facts that she found, or to cherry pick them, or to spin them, as we say today. She followed what she discovered to be truth. It led her in a direction she did not want to go, did not expect to go. And she was criticized. She was lambasted by people that had previously been her allies for misrepresenting the position that she had actually set out to uncover.
Do you remember the name of the book?
From Time Immemorial.
Thank you. I'm just going to make a note of that.
But I bring it up as a general approach to your question, that if we want to be ethical, we have to have our information straight. We have to be willing to hear the other side. If you're only watching Fox News, you got a big problem. If you're only watching MSNBC, you got a big problem. If you're only reading the New York Times, you got a really big problem. You can, and it's hard. I mean, we only have so much time. We only have so much mental energy. And I'm a slow reader, so it takes me longer than it takes most people. How do you find people that you can rely on? And I mean, I've tried. And I've been told, oh, go listen to this person. They're very balanced. And I don't find them balanced at all. So I keep looking. Because if I'm going to have an opinion, it had better be an informed opinion and a well-reasoned opinion. Otherwise, I'm part of the problem.
I've heard people, I don't even know if they're badly paraphrasing Senator Moynihan, but say, you are entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own truth. And I have a great deal of trouble with that, and the notion of one's own truth as opposed to someone else's truth. Truth seems to be becoming more subjective. And I've heard you say, and I find balance as I think about what truth means. I find balance in what you said, which is that if you want to engage in, and I'm going to use the term argument, but I mean it as a way of logical discourse based on valid premises. If you want to meaningfully engage in argument, call it conversation with another human being, you need to understand that other human being's point of view so well that you could articulate it and defend it if you needed to. And it seems to me that takes some subjectivity out of however one might define truth, and brings the participants in that discussion closer to a middle where they may agree, or at least have better chances of agreeing.
Absolutely. I mean, I talk about this in my TED Talk, which is all about the danger of labels and preconceptions. And what I suggest there is that in order to communicate ethically, I have to be able to articulate my point of view in a way that you can understand it, even if you don't agree with me. And I have to be able to listen and then re-articulate your point of view in a way that demonstrates to you that I've heard you and I've made an effort to understand you. And if I can't do both those things, then we don't have a prayer of ever having any kind of meeting of minds or any kind of mutual respect or finding any kind of common ground.
2 weeks ago, I had a gentleman on the program who was convicted of a sexual assault. He went away for 2 years and got 10 years of probation subsequent to his release. And during the show, I said to him, I find myself a little bit conflicted because, and I've actually written something that will likely publish next week about this. On one hand, I firmly believe that Frankenstein should be required reading because its lesson for me is we have to live with the monsters we create. On the other hand, I don't want to be an absolutist such that it precludes me from seeing another's perspective and judging. And I wonder if a predilection or a predisposition toward judging makes us in some way monstrous.
That's an interesting way of articulating the idea. I have for many years now been irked by this matter of judgmentalism or non-judgmentalism. And it's like so many of these buzzwords, it could be a useful term if it weren't conscripted to be used in many ways that I think it shouldn't be. But there is a treatise by the Jewish sages going back at least 2,000 years called Ethics of Fathers. And the first teaching, the very first teaching, is to be deliberate in judgment. They don't say don't judge, because where would we be without judgments, without evaluations, without assessments, without rational thinking? We have to judge, but be deliberate. Don't rush to judgment. Don't judge superficially. Don't judge without adequate information. And when you look at the debates of the Jewish sages, again, going back a couple of thousand years, there were two great academies of Jewish learning, the House of Hillel, the House of Shammai, and history says that when they debated in those study hall, they argued with such passion, it was as if they fought with swords and spears. But it was never personal. It never carried over to their personal lives. It never carried over outside the study hall. And the majority won, because that's how our system works. The House of Hillel recorded their rulings, but they always recorded the minority ruling along with theirs, and they always recorded the minority ruling first. Because only, as you say, only when you understand the other side of an issue do you truly understand your
own. This may be something like a swan dive into the gray. But I'm thinking about notions of truth, and I'm thinking about judging deliberately, and that judging, however deliberately, leads me to think about the necessity of notions of right and wrong. And if that seems inextricably tied to truth to me, or at least one subjective truth, and to your conversations about ethics and where notions of right and wrong fit, I suspect there may have been a time at which we would have been more objectively sure about things that are right and are wrong. And I am nowhere near that certain anymore.
Well, I think for most of human history, there was an assumption or a presumption that universal truth or universal values were handed down from a higher authority. And that's no guarantee that people are going to behave well, but at least it provides a solid starting point. You mentioned this concept of relative truth, and it always sets bells ringing in my head, because this is nothing new. This was a phrase that was going around when I was in college, which was quite a few years ago. And it always bothered me then. Now, the truth is hard to get to. You can't see every side of a diamond at once. You can't see every side of any three-dimensional object at once. So which is the true perspective? If you're distilling, I always think about automobile ads. Most of them show you the car from the same angle. The front, the side, slightly raised. Why? Because that's how you can provide the best possible representation of a three-dimensional car in two dimensions. But you're not seeing the whole car. You're not seeing the engine, you're not seeing the chassis, you're not seeing the interior. And then those are also part of the car. So which is the true car? It's only when you have all the different angles available to you and you can consolidate them into some kind of a cohesive image. Now you have a true representation of something. But we can't do that at once. We can't hold multiple ideas in our heads at one time. So going back to the idea of statistics or data, you have information, but then you have to provide context for that. And once you start providing context, then it starts getting into values and starts getting into personal biases, whether conscious or unconscious. How do you look at the whole picture at one time? You can't. And so you look at it from different time angles and different moments, and you try to develop some sort of composite, and you try to eliminate your own personal biases, which isn't possible completely. So we get as close as we can, but part of recognizing truth is recognizing our incapacity to get all the way there and managing that. And that's the whole, when we talk about diversity should not be about representation and checking boxes. It should be about intellectual diversity, having a community of people coming from different points of view, different perspectives, who together create the greatest possible opportunity to see the whole picture.
And it seems to me that because we are unable to see entire pictures for ourselves and or to consider everything, that is the importance of communication and, I would argue, however selfishly, conversations like this one.
And especially with people that we don't agree with particularly. You know, that should raise some flags for us right now, because you and I think a lot alike on a lot of issues. It would be good to have someone in the room who thinks quite differently.
And I will, just ahead of our first commercial break, tell you that there is a gentleman I think we both know. I will not name him here. He and I think vastly differently on any number of topics, politics included. And he said to me one day, "You do know, of course, that if you and I were in Congress, we would get things done." And he said that because he was recognizing our respect for each other and our willingness to listen to the other and to contemplate what the other is saying. So at this point, let's do break for our first commercial break, and we will be back in about 3 minutes. See you then.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life, from any circumstances, a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, "Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network." For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brand's distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back. There he is. Welcome.
Thank you.
One of the things that I appreciate and admire about you, Yonason, and I think of a quote that I use often from Henry Miller, who refers to the miracle of personality. And I marvel at yours. And you mentioned earlier your TED Talk. And one of the things I love about that is that you come out to the front of the stage and you stand for a moment and sort of let your audience take you in. And then you say, I am a religious fundamentalist. And then you let them take that in. And there's this beautiful moment in which people are trying to imagine what exactly is going on here. I also know that you have done recently a presentation called The Hitchhiking Rabbi. And I would like if you would share for our audience some of your post-college, pre-seminary history, because I don't think many people would expect that.
Well, let me riff for a moment, if I may, on the TED Talk, because I actually gave the TED Talk twice.
Okay.
I gave it at St. John's University in New York, and let me try to be as diplomatic as possible. The video did not come out in a way that was usable, which was very frustrating at the time. However, I'm very grateful, which often happens, because when I gave it the second time in Colorado Springs, the venue was better, the cameras were better, the crowd was better, I was better. But it started the same way. And what I found particularly interesting is that when I gave that opening line, I'm a religious fundamentalist, when I gave it the second time in Colorado Springs, there was dead silence. When I gave it at a university in New York City, there was chuckling, which I found really interesting. And my take on it was the New York crowd must have thought, who's he kidding? A religious fundamentalist would never be standing up on the TED stage. Clearly, this is a joke. Colorado Springs, there was an uncertainty, which is actually what I expected and what I hoped for. Because then I stepped forward. I said, I know that's a dangerous way to start a talk. And people laughed and it broke the ice. And it set the tone for my talk. But to this day, I think my favorite moment as a professional speaker was after that TED Talk in Colorado. As I was circling around and coming back to the auditorium so I could hear the other speakers, a woman intercepted me and she said to me, when you came out on that stage, I knew exactly what kind of person you were. And I knew exactly what kind of talk you were going to give. And you blew away my expectations. Thank you for giving me the chance to know who you really are.
Love that. Who are you really?
Yeah. And it's an advantage I have as an Orthodox rabbi, that people will make snap judgments about who I am. And it gives me an opportunity to challenge their stereotypes, to get them to challenge their own stereotypes. And one way I do that is with my backstory. Come around to your question. When I graduated from college with a degree in English, I was faced with the inevitable dilemma of what does one do with a degree in English? And I had a few ideas, none of which panned out. But what I realized was that I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a storyteller. I wanted to be an oracle of wisdom, which I may still be aspiring to become, but I realized that having grown up in a very comfortable upper middle class home, I didn't have any real stories of my own to share, and I didn't have real wisdom of my own to impart. And that what I really needed to do was to put myself in a situation where I would face the unexpected and the uncomfortable on a daily basis to shake me out of my comfort zone. And so I embarked on a trip hitchhiking across the United States. And yeah, it was I almost chickened out the first day out. I woke up in a campground in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Woke up is not really the right way of saying it, because I didn't really sleep that night.
Mm-hmm.
I was so filled with anxiety, so filled with trepidation, wondering how I had ever convinced myself to embark on this wacky scheme. But in that moment, I recognized that this was, what's the term? It's not coming to me. This was a point of decision.
Watershed.
This was a moment in which my life was going to go in one of two directions. And I rallied the fortitude to carry on. And I can chart the entire trajectory of my life from that moment.
Mm. I want to hear about that trajectory, but I'm curious about one specific thing. In that night of sleepless anxiety, did you ever wonder, okay, what's the worst that could happen to me if I persist?
Yeah, it really wasn't. It wasn't really fear of what might happen to me. It was just fear.
Oh yeah.
They say that all fear stems from fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taking a wild leap into the unknown. And I really didn't, I can't say I was afraid of anything. I do tell the story that there were two elements involved in my decision to continue. And one is what I said that I recognize as a pivotal moment, is the word I was looking for earlier. And the other was that I had told everyone I knew what I was going to be doing. And when I contemplated slinking back with my tail between my legs and confessing that I chickened out after one day, there was nothing that could happen on the road that could be worse than that.
I think people underestimate the power of vanity.
Well, yeah. Fear it's one of the terms I use in my keynotes on ethics, is fight fear with fear. Because when our minds go wild thinking about all the things that might happen if we do what we are thinking of doing, we can employ our imagination just as effectively to start imagining all the things that could be wrong if we take a different course.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't guarantee we're going to make the right decision, but it can help us get back to a kind of equilibrium where free choice now has a more fighting chance.
I have this theory, probably on its way out, like most of my other theories, that I'm going to use your term, pivotal moment. We don't recognize those things when they're happening. We're only able to see them in hindsight. Do you agree with that? And if so, how long do you think it took you to recognize that as a pivotal moment?
I think in general, you're right that we often don't recognize those. I think in this case, I did. It was so dramatic. It was so glaring. I mean, I had been planning this trip for months against tremendous opposition by my parents, as you might imagine, and wonderment by my friends, and a certain amount of skepticism by my friends whether I would actually go through it. And the weight of decision, the vast difference or distance between going forward and giving up, there was just no way of not feeling the magnitude of that moment. But one of the stories I tell in the Tales from the Hitchhiking Rabbi is a story that I heard from one of my rabbis when he had been in Israel in seminary for a number of years, and he was taking his first trip back to America. And he got on the plane, and some of your listeners will remember a time when you got on a transatlantic flight, there was one movie projected on one screen that everyone in the section watched together through a pair of cheap plastic headphones.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Rabbi Mendel, as we called him, he hadn't seen a movie in a long time, and he wondered, I wonder what are movies like now? Have they changed much? So I started watching the movie. He told us that the first thing that occurred to him is you could always tell when something important is about to happen. How? Background music.
Mm-hmm.
The music starts to swell, and you know at any moment the story is about to take a dramatic turn. He said, wouldn't it be great if life had background music?
Wow.
We'd always know when we have to start paying attention and when our choices are really going to make a difference. Of course, life doesn't have background music. So what do we have to do? We have to live every moment as if this might be a critical moment. Everything. There's a movie they made a while back. I don't remember it terribly well. Sliding Doors, maybe. It was about a woman who was running to catch a subway car. And she just misses it. And then it backs up and she just catches it. And then it shows how her life unfolds. And it was very cleverly done, in part because they led you to believe that one course was leading her to success and one course was leading her to failure. And then at the very last moments, it flipped.
Oh.
But it's that type of reflection, because we don't know. And even as our lives go forward, we have a charming human proclivity for thinking that we would have been better off had we made different choices.
Oh, yeah.
Which, of course, we have no way of knowing. All we can do is evaluate where we are. We can't possibly know. And, the Monday morning quarterbacking or coaching, why did the baseball coach take the pitcher out at that moment? Or why didn't he take him out at that moment? Well, you don't know what would have happened.
And one of the things I always wonder about in situations like that, first I want to point out that even the background music is retrospective. It's like figuring out what our pivotal moments have been. But I don't know, to elaborate on your point, I don't know that we rarely take the time and thought to appreciate where we are and how we got here, and actually how almost logical our present circumstances are given our pasts. And I always ask people who start down the path of regret, in any given instance, did you ever deliberately make what you knew to be a bad decision? No, nobody ever says yes. Who would do that? So, you take the step and you make of it what you will, and you let whatever transpires from that first step dictate or precipitate the second one, and remain vigilant.
But what you do, or should do, is to learn from experience, and a lot of it goes back to how we started this conversation, making decisions in our beliefs, in our evaluation of information, in the way we allow our values to form. Decision-making is the same thing. Yeah, we're supposed to make mistakes. That's just part of being human. And, the classic helicopter parent, or what are they calling it now? Snowplow parents. Let's hover over our kids. Let's remove every obstacle. Let's make sure they're okay, and they never get hurt. They never skin their knees. Their egos never get bruised. They never experience failure, which means they're never going to experience success. And then they grow up into adults, and they're ill prepared for life.
Yeah,
because we've crippled them. But to sit, the strength it takes a parent to stand back and watch your child struggle, and watch your child suffer. People ask the famous theological question that goes all the way back to Moses: why do bad things happen to good people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, imagine watching a parent standing off to the side, watching a child struggle and suffer, and thinking, what is wrong with this parent? How can this parent stand by watching this child go through this? Because if the parent is wise, the parent knows what the child needs, what the child can handle. And we are children of God. He wants us to grow up and to be mature, and to learn how to make better decisions. And that's why we individually and collectively have to go through difficulties.
Otherwise, we're, it seems to me, driven or motivated by nothing other than our expectations, which might be completely unrealistic.
And often are.
Yeah. All right. At this moment, we will take our second commercial break, and we will be back in a few minutes and have our final segment. See you then.
Are you ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of evolutionary voices for the quantum age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality.
Where potentiality meets reality.
Where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience evolutionary voices for the quantum age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands, distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told. And the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back. I was thinking during the break just now, Yonason, about your description of your geographic journey, if you will, and the difficulty that your parents had with that. I think I recall having the sense from some earlier conversation, I suppose, that your parents or maybe just your father was not a particularly religious man. Do I have that right?
Put it mildly. My parents grew up with virtually no religion at all.
That made me wonder then how, especially given your parents' difficulty with understanding your geographic journey, how did they respond to your spiritual one?
Even worse. Mothers will always be mothers for the most part. They'll forgive almost anything. My father and I were extraordinarily different people. He grew up during the Depression. His father maintained a business through the Depression, but he maintained it by a work ethic that I have trouble imagining. He was gone when my father woke up in the morning. My father would have been 7 years old at the time of the Great Depression, when it started. And his father was gone in the mornings when my father woke up. He came home at supper time. They had supper together. My father went to bed. And that was 7 days a week. For years, he saw his father at supper time. Which, under the circumstances, there wasn't much option. They were doing better than most people. My father, could talk a lot about my father. Yeah. He used to cut classes in high school to go to the racetrack. My father's extremely bright, but as many bright people do, he coasted through much of his high school career, graduated with no honors to speak of. His only option was to go to Santa Monica City College, which he thought he remembered was $5 a semester.
Wow.
And at that point, he realized that he better do something with himself. So he worked hard. And after a year, he transferred to MIT.
Wow.
Which was he couldn't remember whether it was $100 or $200 a semester. His father said, "You can go, but I don't know how we're going to pay for it."
Wow.
And then he enlisted in World War II. Never saw action, but came back, finished college on the GI Bill, became a businessman, reasonably successful. But his whole philosophy of life was responsibility. You do what needs to be done. You do what you're supposed to do. You take care of your family. You contribute to society. That's what life is. And that phrase that came about, the greatest generation, that's what I think drove them, as a sense of duty, a sense of responsibility. Ours is not to question why. Ours is but to do and die. This is the culture. It's how we got through the Depression. It's how we won World War II. It's how we built up this country. But what happened next is that those parents wanted their kids to have all the advantages they didn't have. And so the children of the Depression and the children of World War II produced the children of the 60s. I was a little after that. I was a child of the 70s. But I grew up with pretty much, we were rich. We were comfortable. I didn't lack for anything. I didn't desperately need anything. If I really wanted something, I usually was able to get it materially. And I wasn't happy. I was a very unhappy kid, which taught me that I needed to look elsewhere. And I'm creative, and I always felt that there was a mission to my life beyond just getting by. And so, I wrote stories, I wrote poetry, I studied literature, and my father never understood me. I got a job volunteering to be a peer counselor. Why are you volunteering? I had no direction. And then I had this crazy idea of going hitchhiking. And when that was done, I went backpacking across Europe, and I ended up in Israel. And then to his mind, I ended up in a cult.
Wow.
It was just the latest, worst decision in a long line of bad decisions. And, he didn't talk to me for a year. Eventually, I became a rabbi, had a title, something he could relate to. I got a job teaching. I was publishing articles. Once I was succeeding according to his metric, then he was able to have respect for me, and we were able to develop a closer relationship.
Did he recognize that, I don't even know how to ask this, that in coming around to the place that you did, which was one that he found satisfactory, that you had at least arguably arrived at the same point in terms of title, job, contribution to society, esteem, etc. Do you think he got that?
I think to a degree he did, and I think part of it was that he was able to see the kids of his peers and what a mess so many of them were. Kids with really no direction, with no sense of responsibility. I mean, really, really dysfunctional. And I still remember him. I still remember him saying to me one time, he said, it could be you're doing the right thing after all. Thought, wow. Footsteps of the Messiah. You can hear them outside the door.
Yeah, that reminds me of, and I'm sure you know this one, another Mark Twain quote. It was something like, when I was 14, my old man was so stupid I could hardly stand to have him around. But by the time I got to be 21, I couldn't believe how much he had learned so fast.
Yeah, it was actually one of my father's favorite lines.
Very interesting.
Which I never understood until I got much older.
Yeah. I'm just going to mention this for whatever it's worth, but there's a now deceased writer named Harry Crews, and in a collection called Classic Crews, which I can only sort of marginally recommend because some of the stories in there are positively brutal. But there's a beautiful essay in there called Fathers, Sons, Blood. And at one point I gave it to my father. I've given it to both of my sons. It's just a remarkable thing. I can't believe I don't know this. Last question before I ask you how people can find you. Do you have any siblings?
I'm an only child.
Okay, well, that must have been additional pressure as well.
Well, yeah. And, in the end, it was, I think, a good thing. Well, we don't control these things, but I think that if my father had other children to turn to, he would have been less interested in trying to make it work.
Yeah.
My parents were both born and raised in Los Angeles. They ended up moving to the Palm Springs area, and my wife and I live here in St. Louis. And we nagged them for years to move out where they could enjoy their grandchildren, and finally convinced them to. And it was nice. It was nice for the grandkids to have their grandparents. And it was also a blessing because when my father slipped into dementia and Alzheimer's, we were here to help him, help my mother. My mother just turned 95. So,
wow, God bless her.
Yeah.
So how I will say that as far as I know, all of your books are available on Amazon. If I've searched on your name, Yonason Goldson, and found your books. How else can people find you and your work?
Certainly my website, ethicsninja.com. Books are available there as well. Very active on LinkedIn, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And invite listeners to connect with me there. I am present on Facebook and Instagram, although I don't spend a whole lot of time on those platforms.
And I will second, for listeners' sake, Yonason's notion that you should indeed connect with him. Yonason, thank you very, very much. I sincerely hope we can do this again.
I would love to, Mark. Thanks so much.
Okay. And to all my listeners, thank you for being here. We will see you 2 weeks from today. Until then, take care.
Thank you for tuning into The Anxious Voyage, the program dedicated to sharing stories, helping people, and celebrating life. You can see and listen to The Anxious Voyage on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you have a story to tell, or if you know someone who does, please email the host, Mark O'Brien, at mark@o'briencg.com. In the meantime, please remember, the only bad stories are the ones we don't share.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy.